beyond any terror you have imagined. A nightmare, unlike anything you have witnessed, is born. Because within these walls, the unholy is unleashed. Hellraiser, a film by Clive Barker.
Welcome everyone to another episode of Pop Rant Radio presents Spooktober. Ooh!
The little ghosts flying around us.
The October Pop Rant Radio special, where we watch a classic or newer or some kind of horror movie, scary movie, terrible movie every week and talk about it afterward.
Yep.
My name is Moss. I'm one of your hosts, and with me as always is my good friend and co-host, Eric. How are you today, sir?
Doing pretty well.
Pretty well?
Yep, watching my hand on all those banisters.
Yeah, that would be a good idea, especially after the experience of our characters in today's movie.
Yep.
So today we watched Hellraiser from 1987.
Yeah, a little classic, I guess.
Clive Barker's Hellraiser.
Right. You gotta be sure to add that, because as soon as they drop it, they drop quality.
And just like Children of the Corn from last week, this movie has a million sequels.
Right. It has, I think we have 9? I can't remember.
I lost count.
I know it's like Hellbound, Bloodline,
Deader. That's my favorite. Hellraiser, Deader.
Then you have Revelations. Yeah, Judgment. The one that I really wish we would have watched, Hellworld, which is about MMORPGers and a rave.
Maybe that'll be for next year.
Right.
Yeah, we watched Hellraiser today, and I didn't know anything about this movie other than Pinhead, the iconic character that's always on the cover of every single box.
Yeah, he's kind of up there with Freddy Krueger, Jason Voorhees, Michael Myers.
He's a well-known horror pop
famous
culture
actor of Shrek.
pop culture icon.
There is a Shrek Halloween special.
There is.
Yes.
Maybe it would be like a bonus episode or something. We'll see.
I hate it.
Yeah, so we watched 1987's Hellraiser, and for the first 15 minutes, we were really worried.
Right.
Because the opening of this movie is super rough.
We were just like, what?
Yeah.
What?
Yeah, so the basic premise of this movie, which you don't really find out until significantly into it, is there's a guy named Frank.
Right.
He has weird sexual desires. If you've ever seen the movie The Cell.
Brother Frank,
right.
I'm Frank. I'm Brother Frank.
If you've ever seen the movie The Cell, where Vincent...
That movie's so terrible.
Yeah, where Vincent D'Onofrio has the hooks in him.
Yeah.
Frank is into that kind of thing. It's very sadistic, masochistic.
Right. The next big high.
Right,
sexually.
Yeah, sexually.
Really weird.
So he apparently goes to somewhere and talks to an Asian man.
Is it racist to assume it looked like India?
It somewhere in...
It was giving me a Raiders vibe.
It was. It very much was.
Very Middle East, India, maybe Egypt.
So this Asian man gives him this box. It's like a little cube.
Right.
And it looks like it has golden... The Tesseract cube.
At this end.
Yeah, the cube is a doorway to the other end of space, right? The doors open from both sides.
It has these golden patterns and things on it. He pays the guy a bunch of money for it.
With his incredibly dirty fingers.
It was so off-putting.
His fingernails had all of them were colored dark under the nails, so it looked like he had a bunch of dirt in it.
Yeah, so
this is gross.
He takes this cube and he activates it, and it's like a puzzle box. It opens up. Then he disappears, and we don't really know what happened, but he screams and yells in pain.
Right.
And then we figure out later on in the movie, spoilers, I guess, this puzzle box, when you activate it, it summons the Cenobites.
When you solve it.
Okay, sure.
Even though it solves itself.
It's very vague.
You push the top, and then you push the side, and then it pops open, twists itself, and then closes.
Right. It's not like a Rubik's Cube where it's clear how it functions. It's just really weird. So basically, Frank's soul maybe gets taken by the Council of Cenobites. Cinnabons. The Cinnabon Corporation comes after your soul.
I thought that's what they said at first.
Frank gets trapped, but then he escapes somehow. They never explain.
Right, and he becomes a bag
in
the floor of this 3-story house that he once lived in.
Right. So then we're introduced to kind of our main characters.
Yeah, they do a flip. about like halfway through the movie we switch.
Yeah.
focus.
So presumably it's some amount of time later, like 6 months or a year. They don't say specifically, but we're introduced to Julia and Larry.
Right.
And presumably they're either dating or married. It's never established which.
I almost thought they were just like a real estate group.
Yeah.
At first.
The editing and the pacing in this movie is really awkward, especially for the first like 20, 30 minutes.
Yeah. Well, it gets worse towards the end too.
Yeah, it's really, really weird. So it's kind of unclear who everyone is in this movie. But anyway, so Julia and Larry are a couple. The house that they are moving into was apparently owned by Larry's mother, and Larry and Frank are brothers.
Right.
How long since you were here?
Oh, the better part of 10 years. I wanted to sell it after the old lady died. I couldn't get Frank to agree.
And then when Larry left 10 years ago, Frank kept the house as just like a place to lay low and do drugs and do weird sex shit.
Right.
Because as Julia discovers when she goes upstairs, she finds a bunch of photographs that Frank took of him like sleeping with other women.
Fully clothed.
Yeah, fully clothed. It's
He is,
like
at least.
that. What was that Ride to Hell game?
Yeah, Ride to Hell Retribution.
Yeah, where all the cut scenes of sex that like everybody's just fully clothed.
Right, and it's really uncomfortable.
It's really weird. Then we find out in a flashback that Julia slept with Frank.
Even though it's kind of rapey.
He kind of like forces himself on her, but then she kind of like
she's at
goes along
knife
with it.
point.
Yeah, he like pulls a switchblade. That's a reoccurring thing. He's got a
Right.
switchblade
It
all
always
the
focuses
time.
on it the same way.
Yeah, but then she's into it, and then she tells him, "I'll do anything for you," and then he leaves.
Right.
Cut back to present day. We're also introduced to Larry's daughter, Kirsty.
Who just randomly calls the house?
But they just got there. Like they're not even moving in. They're like looking
Right.
in the house, and she knows that they're there and calls the house. Presumably they haven't been there in 10 years. None of this makes any sense.
Right. She's like, I got a room.
Yeah, she's like, I found a room, and then that never comes into play.
Right. I'm looking for a job. And Larry's like, well, why are you doing that?
I'd really like you to see this house. It's something else.
Maybe in the next couple of days, I gotta find myself a job.
What for, sweetie?
You talking about, Larry? Encourage your daughter, man. Don't be a dick.
So Julia is really weird. Like I made the comment
Yes.
to you. I think she looks a lot like the stepmother from the animated Disney Cinderella.
Oh, yes, and the tapestries, and the draperies.
But I just finished.
Do them again!
Like she kind of has the same facial structure
Well,
and
she's
like
got the
creepy
hair.
eye. Yeah, and
She's got that bonnet
the
there.
yeah the huge 80s hair and,
Well, and the camera loves to do that. Like the famous shot from the Cinderella Disney movie where it like closes in on her eyes, and as she like squints, like the shadows come in.
yes.
There's like 7 shots.
This
of that
movie
in
does
this,
that a lot.
Where she's like at the top of the stairs, like looking down, and like it closes in on her face. Or that one shot that you and I were like, okay, cut, cut, because it holds on her sitting in a chair for like 5 minutes. It's like, no, stop. We get it. She's sitting.
Larry and Julia decide that they want to move in, even though Julia's really creeped out by the house.
Of course, there's maggots all over the place.
Yeah, they go into the kitchen, there's maggots, and Larry's like, oh, that's weird. And then the next day, they've cleaned up the house, just inexplicably. They have the movers.
Even though there's like 30 rats.
Yeah,
upstairs.
there's tons of rats upstairs. It's like, it's just, the place is just trashed. And then it's perfectly fine.
Yep.
Then the movers are like bringing in the bed, and the movies are like super creepy.
Yeah, it's like a young kid, and I guess maybe like a father figure.
Yeah,
Or
I
is
don't
it
know.
older man?
They're both very like creepy guys.
And it's taking 3 of them to move a mattress.
They're just moving a mattress. They're not moving like the bed or anything. And
Or
then
like a couch.
yeah, it's really weird. So then Kirsty comes home and is like, "Hey, Dad, how's it going?" Then there's the part where Larry and the 2 movers are trying to move the bed up the stairs. And then Julia comes in. The 2 movers are like eyeing Julia like, "Oh, you know, she's hot." Like they're
Right after they
ogling
just
her.
hit on the daughter.
And then the dad is like, "Oh, no, the mover is like, hey, you got any beers?" Like they're in the middle of moving this bed.
Right.
And Larry's like, "Oh yeah, sure," and looks at Julia.
And she's like, they're in the fridge.
And then he's like, "Well, I guess I'll go get them."
You got any beer?
There's some in the fridge.
Oh, well. Why don't I get it?
But it's weird.
Why?
Like, I think they were trying to make a point of Julia saying like, "I'm not going to go get those beers. I'm not your slave."
Right.
But that's not how it's edited, and that's not how it plays.
Yeah, and I think they were like trying to consistently do that in earlier shots to show that there's like tension between the 2 of them.
Right.
And maybe they're not getting along because like she clearly doesn't want to be here. She doesn't like the house.
But as we learn throughout the movie, like, Larry's just a really good, decent guy.
Yeah, he's just a nice person.
He's just a nice dude.
I mean, he wakes up in the middle of the night to answer the phone because his daughter has a nightmare at one point.
Yeah,
and
that was weird.
He's like, it's okay, sweetheart, just go back to bed.
Yeah.
And it's like, he's just a good person.
He gets the shit end of the stick in this movie.
You and I were both like, they're going to kill him.
Oh, definitely.
And he's not going to deserve it.
Yeah, he's definitely dying. So then Kirsty comes over, the movers ogle her, and then the one mover's like,
That your daughter?
Uh-huh.
Got her mother's looks.
Her mother's dead.
Yeah. And then the guy's like, oh, and the other guy's like,
yeah, the one dude, he's just like
laughing.
he's just like really doofy laughing and like sips his beer.
Right,
It's
and like puffs on a cigarette a
They
little
still
bit.
haven't moved the bed upstairs. They're like drinking beer as they're trying.
It hasn't moved.
And
It's in the same spot.
He has a cigarette in his mouth while he's trying to move. Like, put out your fucking cigarette. Oh, and then there's that one part where Julia is like smoking and she like drops a cigarette and like steps on it inside the house.
Right after he's like, this is my childhood home. And she's like, how would this be a childhood? But
Weird.
then comes my favorite scene.
This is so
because
great.
It's so weird. Because it's jumping back and forth between flashback sex scene.
Right, the flashback of Julia and Frank having sex
Right.
in the past.
That rapey one we were mentioning earlier.
Yeah.
And then what's clearly going to be the first victim, which is Larry's hand to a nail
Yeah.
that is sticking out of the post.
Right.
But it's the back of the nail.
Yeah, the back of the nail is like sticking way out of the wall. Like this nail is so long.
Like someone went to hammer it in and like tapped it once, was like, well, that'll do. And like left.
So as they're trying to move the bed up the stairs, they're like heaving the bed, like trying to get up the stairs.
He's like, I'm gonna fall, and when I fall, you push it.
And
Larry.
then so he moves his hand back into the nail and it like gashes his hand
Like,
open.
It runs down. It's between like his thumb and his pointer finger.
Right.
It like runs down quite a bit, And I was like, oh, okay, he's gonna get a cut. It's gonna be bad. It's a gore. But then he goes upstairs and he's like fountaining.
Right.
all over the floor.
It's like Larry's jugular vein was in his hand.
Yeah, he hit the artery that's in your thumb.
So he runs upstairs. Julia is just remembering the sex scene, like upstairs, really creepily.
In the attic.
Larry runs up to the attic and then shows Julia, and he's like,
I cut myself.
I cut my hand, and there is just blood everywhere. Like it is like he
Like,
walked
his
off the
hands are-
set of Evil Dead.
His
Like there's
hands are
so much
covered in it.
blood.
His shirt's covered in it. There's puddles on the floor.
Is it deep?
I don't know. I haven't looked. You know me and blood. I'm gonna faint.
You're not going to faint.
Shit.
And then he's like, I can't look at it because I get sick and I faint with blood. That never comes back. So they clean him up and they bandage him. Then we're at a dinner party.
Right, but before this, we get the floor.
Oh, right.
Absorbs the blood, and then
Yes.
it cuts down below the floorboard where there's like a bag.
I think it's supposed to be a heart.
Right,
Like
but
it's like a beating heart in the
Yeah,
floorboards.
Even though it's a trash bag.
Yeah, it looks like a trash bag.
It's
yeah.
a trash bag.
But I think it's supposed to be the heart. This is where the movie gets kind of cool because, as we found out, the makeup is awesome.
Yeah,
in
and
this
even
movie.
a lot of effects.
Yeah,
Like,
all the
effects are
traditional
really
effects,
decent.
really, really good. So the blood seeps down on the floorboards, and there's like beating heart, and then this like body reforms
Yeah, it's
out
like,
of the blood and the sinew.
It's like two like arms come up and like start pushing up from the floorboard.
It's super creepy.
And like this brain starts to like form a shell around it, and then like it connects to the body, and it's
Yeah.
like it all looks really good. Like
Yeah.
way better than any CG that's nowadays.
Right. And it's clearly like they filmed it and then like reversed the film.
Yeah, there's a lot of reverse shots.
Yeah, but it looks really good, especially for its time. But like you can tell what's going on, and
Yeah.
I was like, okay, like this is impressive. This
Yeah,
is giving me some hope for
it's
this
a
movie.
really good use of reversing footage and then like stop motion.
Yeah.
Like a really, really good combination of both. And they use a lot of like liquid prosthetics.
Yes.
On like this character who eventually, like, spoiler, it's Frank. The liquid prosthetics on him look really good, and he looks like he's like soaking wet the whole movie.
He looks like he has blood and sinew and like muscle tissue and like dripping off of him.
Like
And
he's being reborn.
yeah, and it's
essentially.
all makeup. It's not obviously it's not CG. This is 1987. It all looks
we would know.
great. Like it looks fantastic.
Yeah.
And that can't be stressed enough. Like the costumes and the makeup and the traditional effects and things in this movie, like they all look great.
Yeah.
They are awesome. So then we're in a dinner party where they've invited over another family
Or
that's
something.
also never in the movie again. But
I thought it was a family because like the like other father looks like Larry, and I thought, oh, this is the like another brother.
I think that was just coincidence.
I think it was because then when they like started to do like hitting on scenes between like the old son and Christy, and he flips a cigarette into his mouth.
Yeah, that
and
was
then
weird.
He flips it back out, and it's like that's lit.
Again,
Ow.
yeah, a lot of weird editing, and the other big thing is because we were reading a little bit on Wikipedia after we watched the movie, there's a lot of like erotic imagery in this movie. So I think they were kind of going for that vibe, and they cut some scenes and things out of the movie to keep it from having an X rating. So there's some sexual like undertones going on, but sometimes they really don't play. And I think the cigarette in the mouth was like, I think they were trying to do something.
Like an oral fixation kind of thing.
And then she's like super impressed by it. So anyway, so the oldest son, who's Steve.
Yep.
So Steve has a thing for Kirsty, so they're like making googly eyes at each other.
Who needs to shave the back of his neck.
Oh, it's so bad. There's that one over the shoulder shot where like the camera's right next to him.
And he has like a really short haircut, and then he has like scraggly neck hairs.
Jungle of neck hair on the back of his neck.
Gross.
Super weird. Julia excuses herself from a party, goes upstairs where she finds Frank.
Right, Zombie Frank.
Zombie Frank, who is like, "Don't look at me."
They said it like 5 times.
So then, very quickly, and this was one of the problems we had with the movie, because the premise that we're going to get into here in a second, we both really enjoyed. Like, we really like the idea of what this movie was trying to do, because what happens is Zombie Frank wants Julia to bring him more bodies, to bring people to die, so that he can take their flesh and, like, absorb them and regenerate himself. That was kind of cool.
Yeah. But again, it's something that they abandon like halfway through.
They do. So the next few scenes of the movie are basically a sequence of Julia goes to work and she's like at a bar. There's a businessman that's like, "Hey, you're really good looking." And she's like, "Okay, let's go back to my house." And then takes them upstairs, kills them with a hammer.
Yeah.
And then Frank, Zombie Frank, Brother Frank.
Yeah, Brother Frank, as he announces.
Brother Frank, like, eats them or absorbs them or whatever, and she always leaves the room. And then she has to hide the body, because then Larry comes home and he's like, "Honey, I'm home!" And she's like, "Shit, I've got to hide this corpse." And there's that really funny shot where she just, like, draped the jacket over, like...
Right, and we were like done.
That does nothing.
Yeah. There was also that really cool shot that we were talking about where Zombie Frank's like crawling over to him. And it was like, that was genuinely creepy and unnerving.
There's some really good cinematography here, which is weird because there's some really great editing. Like, that was one because like she walks out of the room and the door stays open and the camera like pans from her face down and like we see Frank crawling on the ground and then the door shuts.
Right.
It's like that was really cool and creepy. And then there's some
a
really
whole bunch of garbage shots.
Awkward editing in this movie too. Like, clearly, because when we were reading on Wikipedia, they had to cut a couple things because they were too gory or too intense or whatever.
Right.
And like it's very obvious in some parts. There's like very quick cuts and you can't see what's going on.
Yeah.
And like so you can tell like those are the parts where they actually cut things to keep the movie rated R.
Yeah. And I think it works great though. Like,
yeah, for the most part. There's a couple times where it's like it is weird. It's like it would have been more effective almost if you just implied it and didn't show it for like half a second.
Well, and the weird thing is it would have gotten away with it easily nowadays, I think.
Oh, yeah,
a lot of stuff that they were mentioning that they had to take out is like that's in movies nowadays that are R.
Yeah, and you were talking about how this movie, even though it's gory and bloody, like it's that classic like 70s, 80s gore and blood where it's clearly like movie gore and blood.
Yeah.
So it's not gross.
It's not Cabin Fever 2.
Right. Skin.
Which we couldn't get into.
Skin peeling
because
off.
Skin peeling is my number one thing that I don't do.
Yeah, skin peeling's no good. Julia brings home like 2 or 3 guys.
Yep.
They die. Frank regenerates some more.
He turns into the Red Skull.
He turns into Red Skull, essentially. And then he's like...
He wears like a cute little suit and he looks ridiculous.
He does. Because, yeah, he puts on the clothing of one of the businessmen, but he's just like bleeding all over it. So it's like totally pointless. And then he turns to Julia and he's like, "I want you. I want to touch you." And she's like, "You're fucking creepy because you're still all muscly and blood." But she's kind of into it because there was that one moment where she put his bony, gross fingers in her mouth.
And I was like, no, no, stop.
It was bad.
It's real gross.
Yeah, it was bad. So then there is an abrupt transition to where now we basically follow Kirsty for the rest of the movie.
Right.
Like, we've been following Julia. Now our attention turns to Kirsty. She's hanging out with Steve, and like they're making out on the subway, and they come across the weird hobo-looking dude.
Yeah, they're walking through like an alley, and he's like just outside.
He's just like standing there,
just looking at her.
Yeah, it's like a comedy. It's like that scene in Young Frankenstein where Igor is just like, hello, and his like head's just sitting on the shelf.
Yeah,
like the guy's just like looking at them through a door, doesn't say anything, and she sees him.
They both see him. They both like,
and then they're just like,
a little bit. That's like, okay,
that's weird.
You never joking that like this should go nowhere. I hope this goes nowhere.
That yeah, and then he's also in the Kirsty gets a job at a pet store,
right,
off camera.
A pet store that sells birds.
Yes.
Rattlesnakes.
Yes.
Baboons.
Yes.
And crickets.
Yes. Lots of crickets.
Yes.
So then the hobo guy comes into the store and starts eating crickets.
Right.
And Kirsty's like, put those back. And he's just like, no.
Right,
I need a cricket on his beard. Yeah. He leaves.
Well, he vanishes.
Yeah, he just like disappears.
They do the whole like, what's bothering you? She's like, oh, it's just the, and like they turn the camera and he's not there anymore. It's like, stop.
Kirsty comes home because she suspects that Julia is up to no good. She doesn't like Julia.
Even though like 2 scenes ago she was talking about how like she's so prim and proper and she's so nice and blah blah blah. And,
well,
like,
I think
it's always like, yes,
the idea
sir.
was like she's stuck up, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
And so this is where the movie ultimately fails, is that there's some really cool ideas. Like, I really like the idea of Julia has to bring people for Frank to kill and like absorb him.
Right.
The problem is that doesn't have a lot of weight because they don't really establish the relationship between Frank and Julia before this.
Right. There's one like weird rape scene.
And that's it.
Yeah.
Like if we had like even like a 5 or 10 minute thing where like they were really in love, but they couldn't be together. And like that's the other thing is Frank is a total shit person.
Yeah.
And there's no reason for her to be with him.
And Larry's like a total sweetheart.
Yeah, like
who's just a good guy.
If you would have made him a little more 3-dimensional like that, we would have
You could
felt
have made him like a bad boy, quote unquote, kind of character that because she's so prim and proper that, you know, she would naturally be attracted to it because it's something new and, you know, mysterious.
Yeah. They should have like built that idea up.
Yeah, because he's just horrible. He's just a bad guy.
Right. He's just like
he's got this weird
druggy
issue too, where he's like, "Come to daddy." And
yeah, he keeps saying that.
Come to daddy.
So Kirsty suspects that Julia is being unfaithful to her father, so she goes home in the middle of the day and she sees Julia bringing home one of the businessmen.
Right.
Who's this guy's like the nerdiest. He's like Clark Kent
schluppy.
without the Superman.
Yeah.
He's like this is kind of obscure. In Mission Impossible, the first one, like the really doofy guy that walks into the vault and has to disarm it and everything. That they like he looks like him. He's just like the nerdiest guy ever.
It's a very obscure reference.
You're
that
welcome.
One guy that's in there for a little bit.
William Donlow, I think is his name.
William Donlow.
That's even worse. You know his name.
I've seen that movie many, many times. So Julia brings Doofy Guy upstairs, and he's like, what's going on here? Smashes him with a hammer. Frank absorbs him. And then Kirsty comes into the house and is like, oh shit. And then as Julie hides, Doofy Guy, like, he's still alive, and he, like, leans out of the room, and he's like, help me! Very much like Aliens, when, like, the people are in the cocoon.
Yeah.
You're gonna be alright. You're gonna be alright. Help me.
And then Frank, like, comes around the corner, kills the dude, and he's like, hello, Kirsty, my niece. You're looking really good.
It's me, Uncle Frank. And she's, like, freaking out, and he's like, no, don't worry. And then he, like, goes to, like, strangle her.
Because
like,
he's still, like, Red Skull creepy at this point.
Like, why does he, like... You're trying to calm her down. Don't go to strangle.
Well, and then I think it implies like that he wants to rape her.
I would not be surprised.
But they don't really come out and say it, but you get that vibe. Julia is just like gone. Kirsty punches Frank.
Dead Rising disemboweled.
Yeah, she like grabs his stomach and like rips a piece of him out.
It's intense.
And he's like, oh, and she runs and she picks up the cube.
Like Orange Crush comes out.
Right, yeah. The box, the cube, the puzzle box is just on the floor.
Yeah.
And Kirsty like picks it up and he's like, no, don't. And she goes, you want this? And throws it out the window.
Have it. And
yeah.
But she throws it out the window?
Yeah,
she throw it at him.
Throws out the window, and he's like, "No," because I guess he can't leave the house. Maybe
I don't know.
And so she runs outside. She picks up the puzzle box.
Right.
She takes off running.
Then she just walks down the streets of New York.
She passes out. She wakes up in the hospital.
Yep, in like a 1950s hospital.
Yeah, the doctor comes in. The doctor is super weird.
What about this? Ringing the bells? You were hanging on to it like grim death.
I don't remember.
Well, the police will want to speak to you. You know that.
He just
Creepy.
He wants his paycheck. He's getting in there to get out.
I mean, his acting chops, top notch.
And he gets in, he's like, you need to stay in bed, stay in bed. You can call your dad whenever you're out, but you need to stay in bed. Please come on talk to you. See you later.
Yeah, and then he like pulls out the box. He's like, you had this puzzle box. Maybe this will jog your memory. Sets it down, leaves.
Right. But we thought, like, is he in cahoots?
Yeah.
Is he Pinhead?
Well, I thought the hospital sequence was initially like a nightmare or a dream, because that's what
Right.
it seemed like. So she picks up the puzzle box and she activates it somehow.
Right.
Again,
She presses the 2 buttons.
the mechanics of the puzzle box are never clear at all. Then the wall of the hospital opens up into this long hallway.
Yeah.
She goes down it, and then this crazy, like, scorpion, worm.
It looks
like,
what are those things called? They go to it in Rick and Morty. It's those kind of like weird creatures.
Yeah. They look like something out of Doom.
Right. Or like the centaurs from Fallout.
Yeah, they're just like big. It's just like a
This
big,
big pink skin monster with
Yeah.
like giant gnashing
and it has
teeth.
like a face where its like stomach should be, and then it has like the huge tail, and it's chasing her through this hallway.
Yeah.
So she escapes from it,
Right.
jumps out. The wall like closes back up, almost as if it was never open, and then the Cenobites appear.
Right.
And we have Pinhead, classic Pinhead.
Yep.
We have female Pinhead, but she doesn't have pins in her head. She just has like
She
her
has like chains and her
yeah,
throat's
and her
opener.
throat is open, and she
And
has
it's
like
it is clearly supposed to be like
a vagina.
right,
Yeah.
because she's like constantly like rubbing it.
Yes, it's
really weird.
Supposed to be erotic. We have Earl
Toe Jam's
from
missing.
Toe Jam and Earl, yes, and then we have we called him Bill,
Or
but
Chatters.
yeah, he's basically just like his mouth is like open, and you can see his teeth, and he just gnashes.
It's essentially like you can get it like if you ever get like braces done, dentists put it in your mouth where it spreads your like lips full open so that
Yes.
your teeth are bare.
Yeah, and he has no eyes.
Right, his eyes are like closed or
Yeah.
something like that. Well,
So-
he like walks up to her, like shoves 2 of his fingers down her throat, and
Yeah.
it's like, what is going on?
Again, it's kind of vaguely sexual, and then Pinhead starts talking to her. There, you solve the puzzle box,
which is BS.
so now we're here to take your soul.
Or like show you pleasures that you like.
Yeah, like they're gonna expose her to the pain and the pleasures that are beyond her like wildest imagination.
Right, but she's like, no, let me go, and then randomly just makes the giant jumping connection. Hey, someone went missing from your group.
Do you know Frank?
Right,
And they're like, yeah.
Yes, Frank has not left. No one leaves our group. And she's like, I've seen him. Trust me. And they're like, okay.
Right.
And if you're wrong, we'll take your soul.
Yeah, she's like, let me go and I'll give you Frank, and then in exchange for me.
Right.
But at no point in the movie is she expose the idea that like they take people. She just jumps to the conclusion that like, oh hey, Frank was held captured by you and escaped somehow,
Right.
and you want him back. Like none of that. That's just like a giant leap in logic that the movie never
Right,
establishes.
we were joking that like they were missing like the library scene where she goes to the library and finds a book on them.
Yeah.
Or like the nowadays it would be like the Google search.
Right, where she would go get the information that was like, the puzzle box was controlled by the Council of Cenobites and blah, 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 blah.
Aztecs
Like,
wrote it down
yeah,
somewhere.
that's like the cliched, horror movie scene, and like, it's weird, but they should have put it here or something
Yeah.
like that to...
She just jumps that jump.
Right, because the character, her as a character, just immediately gains all the information that the screenwriters want her to have at this
Right.
point. And Kirsty, I didn't mention this earlier, Kirsty looks like a young Winona Ryder.
Right.
Like they look so, like she looks like Winona Ryder looked in like Beetlejuice. Like it's
But it's not.
it's uncanny how much she looks like her. Then Kirsty goes back to the house.
Right, but we get this really weird scene in between this where Larry and his wife are like watching boxing.
Oh yeah.
During like a thunderstorm.
Yeah, and he's
And
like,
Frank's pissed for some reason, and he's
Yeah.
like punching the wall or hitting his head on the wall.
yeah.
And Larry's like, "What's that? I better go check." And she's like, "No, don't." And like they go upstairs, they don't find anything. But then she comes onto him, and he's like, "Oh, okay, let's do this."
Yeah,
So they go to have sex.
she comes on to him so that he won't go upstairs to check the banging, which
Right.
is Frank.
Right, and so they go down to their room, which is on the second level, and they start to like get hot and heavy, and like Frank just comes out of the closet with the switchblade again, And, like, she's like, no, stop, no. And, like, Frank then backs, or no, he cuts a rat.
Yeah, he has a
half?
rat, and he cuts the rat in half. And by the way, there's, like, dead rats all over the place in this movie.
Yeah, he's, like, nailed them to the wall.
Yeah, there's the rats nailed to the wall. It's really weird. So Frank, like, cuts the rat in half, and she sees it, and she's like, no. And then Larry thinks she's saying, no, I don't want to have sex. And he's like, what's with you? You were all over me, and now whatever. And then he leaves. Frank just, like, backs up into the closet.
Right, but she's like, look, not him.
Yeah.
And he's like, you told me you don't love him. And she's like, I don't, but just not him. Like, I can't watch that.
Yeah.
Well, she changes that tune like 5 minutes later.
Yes.
It's really weird.
Frank basically tells her, I need one more body, and then we can leave and we can get out of here.
Right.
So I guess the idea is that he just doesn't want to leave the house before he's regenerated. Like, I guess he could leave the house if he wanted to.
You know what would fix this? If they said anything.
Right.
If there's any explanation.
Yeah, we have no idea if the house is directly involved. Like, because we don't know where Frank was before he came back with the initial blood. So, like, we don't know if he was, like, his, like, soul was trapped in the house.
We assume that when he vanishes, he's in the house. Because in the beginning, when, like, they're in, like, the weird, like, upside-down world, like, with all the chains and everything.
Yeah.
When it vanishes, we just have Pinhead standing in the attic room that we spend most of the movie in, and then he vanishes. So I assume that's where he was.
Yeah. It's really weird because there's never like a shot or like a sequence of shots that reveals, oh, this is where everything takes place. It's just, again, everything is just super, super vague. So Julia ultimately decides, okay, we'll kill Larry so that Frank can fully regenerate. And then, so they do that, they kill Larry, but then Frank puts on Larry's skin.
Right. Instead of healing.
Yeah. So up until this point in the movie, we thought he had just been like absorbing their essence, quote unquote, and regenerating his own body.
They kept on making like straw sounds.
Yeah, like he was
like,
draining
slurping
them. He was slurping them.
He was, like the one guy, he like stuck his fingers into the guy's throat, like through the side, and then we were like, "What's going on?" And all he was like,
"Yeah,
like, what?"
It was like
slurping.
It was like drinking like a squishy from The Simpsons.
Whoa, that's good squishy.
Frank is in Larry's skin.
Right.
Larry's dead, but now the actor that was playing Larry is now playing Frank.
Right.
Which I thought that was kind of cool because it gave him something to do in the movie.
Right, he had to impersonate another actor, which is kind of cool.
But it was...
It's face-off before face-off.
It's face-off before face-off. Frank in Larry's skin has like blood all around.
His hair is like soaked.
The rims of his face. So it's clear that he just like shoved Larry's skin on top of him. Like it's really weird. It's so obvious. Yeah. Kirsty comes home, runs upstairs, and tells Frank in Larry's skin, Dad, Uncle Frank is in the attic and is trying to kill you.
First she goes upstairs and the Cinnabons just like show up and they're like, well, we want whoever did this.
Yeah.
And she's like, no, that's my dad.
Well, yeah, so she sees Frank in Larry's skin, and he's like, sure, go ahead and show her. And she goes upstairs and then finds the corpse of her dad.
Right.
Like with all the skin gone. The Cenobites show back up and they're like, we want the one who did this. And she goes, no, that was my dad.
Right.
And they're like, no, we want him. She runs downstairs.
And they're just like, okay.
Yeah, they just
don't care.
I guess maybe they can only go in that room. Nope. Because that doesn't... Okay, later on.
Then they're all over the place.
So then Kirsty runs back downstairs, and then Frank as Larry gets all super creepy and gives her the whole, like, come to daddy line.
It's like, Frank, you blew it.
Come to daddy.
Yeah, like she puts two and two together.
He's like, I guess we'll cut this cat and mouse shit. And it's like, what?
She scratches him in the face.
Right.
So his face peels back.
Yep.
Julia grabs Kirsty, and then Frank pulls out his switchblade and tries to stab Kirsty, but accidentally stabs Julia as Kirsty like dodges out of the way.
But then he acts like he planned it because he was.
Well, then he's like, "Sorry, baby," and then he drains her. It was weird.
It was weird because it kind of felt like it was like an intentional thing, like he was switching.
Yeah, again, weird editing. So Kirsty runs upstairs, hides in the other room where the corpses are hidden because she comes across them. There was a good jump scare here.
There was, which you and I were like, she's going to open that closet to hide in it, body's going to fall out, and instead it was a Jesus statue.
Yeah, she opens the closet and like a statue of Jesus falls out. And we were like, oh, that's cool. Like,
because this movie, like kind of strangely, like Children of the Corn, had a weird anti-religious message in like the beginning?
It was really, really, really light. Not nearly as prevalent as Children of the Corn.
Not nearly, but like when they first get to the house, there's like a lot of Christ symbolism.
Yes.
And they throw it all away.
Yeah, so again, I think that was just like in the late 70s and 80s filmmaking, like showing religious Christian imagery and then removing it was just a shorthand of like, this is evil, this is satanic, whatever. So like, yeah, I think
it's the cookie cutter's guide to
it very much is
scary movie.
Yeah. It's scary movie making 101. She hides in the room with the corpses.
Yep.
Frank comes upstairs, looks around for her, doesn't find her. One of the corpses like falls out onto her shoulder and like a bunch of maggots fall out of its mouth.
Yeah.
And then Frank,
first guy.
Yeah, Frank like turns, he's like, maybe I heard something. Nah, I won't check it out, and leaves. So Kirsty gets up, walks out of the room. She's at the top of the stairs.
Goes to the top of the stairs and sobs loudly.
And yeah, she's just like, oh, my life is terrible. Frank, of course, is hiding in the attic room, has a switchblade knife.
Again.
And is like, ha, I got you now. She runs into the attic, and then she's like, so I guess you killed him, you did this. And he's like, yep, I did it all, or whatever. He like admits.
Right. He like expositions his whole crime stuff.
Yes. Then the Cenobites show up and they're like, that's what we wanted. We needed to hear it from his mouth.
We've got you now, Frank.
And then, so Frank's like, ah, you bitch, you tricked me.
Right.
And then the Cenobites like chain him up and get him all hooked in and everything.
Yeah.
Kirsty gets out of the room, but then the Cenobites come after her.
Yeah, the weird like chains in the face ones. Like, cutting the wall and like blood's coming out of the wall.
Yeah, she's like, why? Leaving so soon?
Right.
And you and I thought like, you made a bargain. Like if she gives him Frank.
I mean, Pinhead did say maybe.
I want to hear him confess himself. Then maybe.
Yeah, they never agree to it, but they're I mean, this is kind of cool, actually. I kind of like this, where they're just like, nah, we didn't say shit. Like, you're still fucked.
Right, we're from another dimension.
Right.
They're from hell, actually, but...
And then, so she gets a hold of the puzzle box.
Real quick, the puzzle box, stepmom is on the bed now.
Yeah, in another room.
She's holding the puzzle box like she was laid there?
They like Deus Ex Machina the puzzle box back into
why
the
was she there? And why was her
house.
face open?
Yeah, that didn't make any sense. The stepmom was just like, yeah, like chained to the bed.
Right, with her like her hands on her lap, with the box in her hands, and like her face is ripped open.
Didn't make any sense.
Yeah, why?
Kirsty uses the puzzle box to banish the Cenobites one by one.
Right.
Except for Earl.
Which you and I joked about.
Fat Earl, because Steve comes to the house like to see what's going on. And he's trying to save Kirsty. And then Earl, which is the big fat one with the sunglass goggle things, he like comes up behind Steve and he's like, "Arr!" And then like the house is falling apart and like crumbling. And a bunch of debris and like 2x4s just fall on Earl and he just goes down.
We were like, oh, well, he died for real.
Yeah, he's just for real dead.
Yeah.
Because Kirsty banishes all the other ones using the puzzle box, and it's like this like animated effect, and they get taken away to the other dimension or whatever.
Yeah, it looks fine.
And then they get downstairs. They're just about to escape out of the house. The giant scorpion worm pink demon thing shows up again, and it's like, and it like knocks the puzzle box out of her hand.
It's really awkward. It goes on way too long.
Yeah, this is probably the one part where the puppetry like doesn't really hold up.
It literally looks like two wobbly arms like like smacking the puzzle.
And
out of
one
her
of them
hand.
like punches Steve, but it looks really bad. It's like, hey, eat my tiny fist.
It's clear like someone with like a stick with the arm was just like,
yes.
All right, Steve, you have to act 100% of this. We're not gonna hit you. It's not gonna hurt. And he's like, I'll try.
It's like someone's holding like one of those like T-Rex grabby arm things that they make for people. And anyway, so she eventually gets a hold of the puzzle box, and she's like, "Go to hell!" And it like,
Hellraiser.
Yeah. Good joke. And then it banishes that demon. They walk outside, and they're just like, "Well, I guess everything worked out."
But then we get, oddly enough, we then get the weirdest scene in the whole movie, where they go to this weird field where the cool kids go to just burn stuff.
Yeah, it's just like
There's
a
like
field.
7 fires.
Yeah, it's just like people bring things to this field to burn
There's a
things.
chair on fire for no reason.
It's just really weird.
So she throws the puzzle box in the fire, which isn't going to do anything. Like, we know it's not.
Yeah, it's very much Jumanji.
Yeah.
Like, it's the same idea.
But then Hagrid shows up.
Yeah, the hobo from earlier.
Just walks into the fire, grabs the box, erupts into flames, and then turns into a skeleton dragon.
Yes.
And flies away.
I think the idea it was really weird.
Like what we were just saying, like what is going on?
I think so. Number one, it was great because that hobo does nothing in the movie except
he just
that
creeps her out.
It was great. So I think the vibe that I got was that the hobo / dragon thing was supposed to be like Satan.
Yeah, I think that's because they are actually. It's revealed later on in the movies that they are from hell, which is of course the Hellraiser idea.
Right.
Frank kind of says they're from like a different dimension or they're from far away.
Yeah, it's always very vague.
But apparently, like in I think it's the third one, Hellraiser, who gives a shit, is called like they're 100%. These are Satan's
minions or
minions
council or whatever.
So
thank you, Wikipedia.
Yeah, I think it's actually. I think you're right. I think it's supposed to be like a Satan incarnate.
Right. So then the final scene is the puzzle box is sitting on a table back in India or wherever it was at the very beginning of the movie, and the old Asian man is trying to sell the puzzle box to another person. Cut to credits. Like, again, very much the Jumanji ending.
Yep.
And that's Hellraiser from 1987.
Yep, never seen it. Probably, I might watch it again. But probably
yeah, so, yeah, let's talk about that. I think that, because again, the first 15 minutes of this movie, we were looking at each other and we were like, this is going to be a rough watch. Like
we
what
thought
is
it was
going
Children
on?
of the Corn again.
Yeah, well, because it was just... everything is kind of all over the place at the very beginning of the movie.
Yeah.
It's not...
And the acting, it's all, like, when they stop focusing on chops and they start focusing on, like, effects and, like, dramatic moments, like, it's all about acting in those first couple moments, and that's where it really suffered.
And it's all flat. Like, nobody has a personality in this movie. The characters are completely uninteresting. We're not really introduced or given any information about them.
Right.
We just don't care. But after that initial 15 minutes, like the special effects and the makeup and just the kind of the crazy ideas and things that are going on really carry the movie home.
Right. Did it need the Cenobites, though?
Yeah, so that's the big thing about this movie, too, is that there's a lot of ideas that don't really mesh together. You even said while we were watching it, it feels like somebody wrote like a bunch of creepy scenes.
Yeah.
And then they were just like, well, how can we connect all these together?
Let's make a weird hell council.
Right,
because with people.
Because like the scene in the hospital where like the wall opens up and she goes in, like that's all really cool and like creepy.
Right.
Like there's a lot of awesome, scary, creepy imagery in this movie.
Or like the really creepy dream that Kirsty has where she's like standing over like a table.
Yeah.
With it looks like a wedding gown.
And there's like a baby crying in the background.
Like blood starts to like show up on it.
Yeah,
and,
like
it
that
gets
was
worse and worse. And
that was
like,
really cool, but it's not connected to anything else in the movie.
And it was really eerie and creepy, and it fit the tone.
Yeah.
But it served zero purpose. We still don't know what it meant.
Yeah, I think that...
Because then the baby was in the hallway, too.
Yeah, there was a baby crying in the hallway, and I even turned to you during the movie, and I was like, I think she's going to be pregnant with, like, a demon baby or something by the end of this movie, because they kept... like playing on the idea of the child crying.
Well, and also there was a lot of flower symbolism in the hospital, which usually implies virginity and like the loss of it.
Right. So again, kind of going back to the idea that this movie has like this erotic sexual undertone.
Which is such a weird tone for a movie about a guy that shoves hooks into people and then pulls them apart.
Well, and it kind of works at certain points.
Yeah.
But it's not fully realized. Like it does not follow through in the entire film.
It is the last thing I would have expected from a movie called Hellraiser.
Yeah, and that's what's kind of crazy is that there's a lot of really cool things and a lot of really good ideas and themes in this movie, but it's kind of like 2 or 3 movies kind of cobbled together.
Right, like what I said it when she kills the first guy, that this is very much so like Little Shop of Horrors.
Yes.
Like it's someone tricking people to come to this area where this monster kills them, but they want more. Like, they always want more.
Yeah, and I think it could have been cool if, like, that was the premise of the movie, and then kind of like Little Shop of Horrors, like, Julia starts to have, like, doubts and regrets about what she's doing.
Right, because he's never satisfied.
Yeah,
and maybe her morals catch up with her.
Exactly, when we kind of, like, follow her on this journey of, you know, her feelings and, like, her response to these terrible things that are happening.
Right.
But we never get there. Julia kind of just turns into, like, the evil stepmother, essentially.
Right, and that's when we have that big shift from her to Chrissy, and it's like now it's her movie.
Right, yeah, and then the rest of the movie, it was just a really weird shift. Like I said, it feels like it was almost like 2 different screenplays, and then right in like the middle of the movie, they just kind of cut them in half and then swapped them around.
Yeah, and I mean clearly they got what they wanted which they definitely wanted to make like a Jason Voorhees or Freddy Krueger.
An iconic horror villain.
Yeah. And I mean, he is iconic. Like, he looks weird. His voice is perfect.
Yeah. And
his presence is great.
And it's strange because Pinhead's barely in this movie. So I would imagine that in the movies following this, like, he probably becomes a much more central figure. And again, the only thing that I knew about this movie going into it is that Pinhead was in the movie.
Right.
And, he's on the cover of all the movies and that sort of thing. Like,
he's the picture on the Netflix preview.
Yeah, exactly. Like, he has a really, really small part. And I think that's kind of cool, actually. Like, that he became so iconic with just a small part in this movie.
Well, and I like that the hero, like, has to use him to take out this other villain. It was kind of this idea of, like, two villains with like one hero.
Yeah.
And I liked that premise of playing them against each other.
Yeah, and the villains have different goals. Yeah, exactly.
Like, that was kind of a cool twist. And I mean, we kind of both expected this just to become like Pinhead just shows up from a summon and then he walks around either like, I don't know, like a campsite or like a college dorm or something like that. And he just wreaks havoc, but...
Yeah, we expected like a slasher movie, and that's totally not what this is.
He's in this for maybe 5 or 6 minutes.
Yeah, total, if that.
Yeah.
I actually really enjoyed this movie. I'm going to recommend it.
I think I would too. It's a gore fest, but it's not like a gross gore fest.
Right. And the movie's not perfect by any means. Like, it has a lot of problems with the characters and the characterizations and the structure and the editing. But the sheer craftsmanship and the clear care and the uniqueness of the visuals and the makeup and the special effects, very practical special effects, like all of that stuff is so cool. We live in a time where movies are made with all CGI and all of the quote-unquote soul or heart of effects are kind of removed and very cold and calculated via the computer, and things often look really, really fake.
Yep.
And it was just kind of cool to see a movie where people like made all this. Like, people put all this together, with their hands and like built all these things. It was just really, really cool.
Yeah, it was kind of, and I think it's underappreciated. Like, I don't hear about this as much as Halloween or Friday the 13th or, Nightmare on Elm Street, but I think this is kind of better than some of those.
Yeah.
Like, he's not in it as much as like Jason Voorhees, which I know some people like a lot about Friday the 13th, but I think visually the effects create a more interesting story than, say, Friday the 13th or Nightmare on Elm Street.
For sure.
Or Michael Myers, for that fact.
Yeah, definitely. So ultimately, like, a flawed movie, but
very flawed.
Not a perfect movie by any means, but definitely worth watching.
Right. It's good for a horror movie.
So this has been our Spooktober episode on Hellraiser, Clive Barker's Hellraiser.
H-R and the rest of it's underlined. It felt very Stranger Things-esque when that title showed up.
The opening, yeah. Which, and that's another thing. Same production company as Children of the Corn.
Right, AT&T.
Yeah, the logo looks very much like AT&T.
It's AT&T if you Dutch angled it and then colored it red.
Yes, it very much is the same logo. So we hope you enjoyed our discussion of Clive Barker's Hellraiser. If you did enjoy it, you can let us know. You can find the show on social media on Facebook and Twitter at Pop Rant Radio. If you are listening to the show on iTunes, please rate and subscribe. It super helps out the show.
Yep.
And as always, we'd like to thank Major for the theme songs.
Thank you, sir.
You are the man. And other than that, we will see you next week for more Spooktober. Ooh.
I wonder what we'll watch.
Who knows? All right. Thanks for listening, guys. See you next week. Bye.
Bye.